Hello, welcome back to Fishing Without Bait, a lifetime without definitive expectations. And as promised, we're going to continue our conversation with our delightful guest, Jenni Crumpton Ross. So the whole idea, it's action and effort. What I tell my patients is, I'll do my part. I expect you to do yours.
Yeah, and I think we have that, we have the blueprint for that action in our DNA. I think we truly do. And it gets readjusted and maladjusted by so many of our life experiences. And I think that, that's one reason that I'm so intrigued by the effects and the impact of what I like to call mindfulness-based mental health, which, I view as including breath awareness and movement in combination as a way to start to unravel a lot of that muscle memory of our traumatic experiences. And, many studies have shown that this mindfulness combination really does start to transform the expression of our DNA. I've certainly experienced that personally. Um, and, really beyond just creating new neural pathways to create new habits and beliefs and views of the world and views of ourselves, it really does feel like, something that alters our makeup and almost, at least in my experience, has been um, recrafting uh, who I am in every aspect physically, mentally, spiritually, and really kind of leads for me back to my original soul purpose and the original reason. You were saying earlier we're spirits living in human bodies and having this human experience. And what I've found with mindfulness is just the ability to get back there, to that. Do you ever have those moments, Jim, where do you ever think back to your childhood? I mean, early childhood, um, when there was a fleeting time uh, where you felt like this complete being. You had this confidence in yourself that's like otherworldly. Like I could leap across mountains and swim through stormy sea, like you come and you feel like you have this innate wisdom when you enter the world and you watch the things happening around you in the adult world or in the environment around you and feel very either threatened or confused or but I really do feel, and I remember being two, being three, and feeling this invincibility and this purity and this belief. And I feel like that's, sort of how we come in and we get embodied and we're these souls that have, like, we're like, okay, this is what I'm going to go back and do. I'm going to get in a body and I know what to do this time. And I'm going to go and I'm going to live this way and I'm going to learn this and I'm going to learn these lessons. And all of that gets lost, so easily, particularly with our experiences of trauma, just eats away at that, and almost replaces the essence of our being with something else that's just trying to survive. And that survival mode can really lead us into, so many different ways of stopping ourselves and making ourselves sick. Um, and so I think, what you're doing is so important. And I feel like, this is also our mission at Kula for Karma is really to help people unravel back to that point of purity, of belief in ourselves and our what we're here for and our purpose and why we are who we are and our love of that person. And I feel like mindfulness really has guided me personally into that space of healing.
So there's three essentials to recovery, Jenny, and that's honesty, open-mindedness, and a willingness to try, as I said in the introduction. And those are certainly essential. Thomas Merton was a Trappist monk, became one later in his life, and also a Zen master. And he talked about that we were created for joy and not for pleasure. And if you don't know the difference, you've yet begun to live. So I talk about pleasure as being like eating potato chips. As long as you're eating the potato chips, you feel that pleasure, but that needs sustained. Joy does not need sustained. Okay, so what you're talking about, helping people develop what we would call in the Buddhist world a beginner's mind. There's an expert's mind, and I usually use the analogy of a horse race, a thoroughbred horse race. They're big, magnificent animals, and they can do one thing well. However, what do they hold? What do they have over their eyes?
Blinders.
They have blinders on. Have you ever, well, of course, you've been around a 3 or a 4-year-old child, and everything that they see is full of wonder and joy. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's having a beginner's mind. And that's what we try to do is help people step
Mhm.
back and look at things rather than from them. And it just have that wondrous joy. But unfortunately, 3-year-old, 4-year-old little boys actually have more emotional ability than girls the same age. Okay, but sooner or later they get indoctrinated into what I call the men's club. All right. So really the only acceptable emotion that men can share with another man is anger. They
Mm.
can't share anything else. So sometimes I'll tell guys, I'll say, "Could you take that man hat off just for a little bit?"
I remember I'd be interested to see what you think about this, Jim. I remember being 3 or 4 and playing at my house, and I was jumping around on toys and, um, I felt athletic and strong, and I'm running through the woods and jumping over things, and I remember having a very distinct thought that I was a boy. And I don't know at what point the whole gender construct thing kind of comes into play in our psyches and in our socialization. Might be different for people in different communities, honestly. But I distinctly remember thinking, I must be a boy because I feel very confident and I feel like I have this prowess, and a strength and a confidence.
Well, that's really before you started to hear these words all the time in your life. You need to, you have to, you better, you
Mm,
must. Those are self-defeating words, Jenny. No child is born with those words. No child is born with that vocabulary.
right. Yeah, and so I guess I just sort of, had started to attribute those qualities with boys for whatever reason, and I thought, "Well, I'm definitely one."
It took a lot of courage for you to have what we would call a moment of clarity or an epiphany and walk away, step aside from that society. Tell us about that.
Yeah, honestly, I feel, I tried to suppress it for a long time, and, I was always a writer. That's always how I looked at my feelings and examined things and tried to figure things out. I couldn't really always do it in my brain. I had to put it into words. And so I started very young with journals, writing stories about injustices of things as, a 7-year old. And, uh, I think I was always questioning things, but too afraid to really speak up, or if I did speak up, it was definitely quashed, and a cause for even more, control to be held over me. So you learn to back away from that in the effort to pursue your own freedom to whatever extent you can grasp it. Um, but I was always sort of considered the black sheep of my family for whatever reason. I was a really good kid, made good grades, was a cheerleader, I did all the things. But yet was still always considered a bad kid by, the powers that be
And
in my
who were the powers that be?
well, certainly my mother. Um, Parents are very formative. And, I had 2 older sisters, and they really followed the straight and narrow path, and, the more I diverged from that, the stranger I was. So, I think at some point, I was pretty brainwashed into thinking that I deserved abusive language or deserved abusive treatment. And that really follows you into adulthood. And I'm sure you could say a lot about that. But it really does impact you behaviorally, um, in the choices you make, in the relationships you choose, in the standards you set for yourself, even, in a job, in your employment, in your career. What do I deserve versus what do I not deserve? Because somewhere in there, I'm still that bad kid. And it's amazing how it can impact every facet of your life. I think these are called adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. And I've read up on those in the context of healing trauma, and really how this muscle memory of the identity that you were referring to earlier gets so concretized, into your psyche and your behavior. And I really think that going through several traumatic experiences, and then those sort of like snowballing into adulthood, into the 20s, into the 30s, still searching for that identity, the true identity. You have to really slough off a lot, that has been absorbed into your very cells and your very muscle memory. And I think I think that's why we revert back when we go back to see family. So many people, at the holidays, this is always a popular topic of, reverting back to those roles, um, and characterizations, of your childhood and that family environment. And so, um, I think that with mindfulness, with yoga, with breathing techniques, with the types of meditation that work for me, because I agree with what you said earlier. Not everything has to be sitting still for hours on the top of a mountain. Um, I really just had so many deep realizations, and I feel so grateful for that. And I don't know what led me there other than, this was my time. I do believe, my belief is that, and it took me a long time to get to this belief, but I do believe that we come back, to learn more things. And I do sometimes feel the imprints of former lifetimes. And I do have this belief that I've developed just even over recent years that but we're the same at the core. We're that soul, that being, that stillness, that I've heard you talk about, that observer, that conscious observer, that has been with you through everything in your life, has witnessed everything in your life, but is always silent and observing. And the more I started to try to get in touch and stay in touch with that quiet observer, the more I was able to view my life from this perspective of, realizing other people aren't always right. And there's a part of me that's beyond the control of anyone or anything. And so, really, just spending time um, breathing into that conscious observer and trying to not detach, but to lessen my dependence on the person that I'm watching go through all of these experiences. And that just really helped me to start to see, there is a way to change my life. There is a way to heal my complex PTSD. It's not easy and it's not pretty, but there is a way to start to observe myself and to observe my experiences and to see them not as enemies, but more as something that I'm here to learn from, and that is refining me into that depth of who I truly am, that eternal soul. And the more I practice this, the more I'm able to move beyond a lot of the symptoms of my PTSD. Having a child, I will say, and my therapist warned me about this, having a child, because so much of my trauma did occur in early childhood and throughout childhood, it was very triggering. Not only was it triggering to watch my daughter go through certain stages of infancy, toddler, small child, etc., but it brought memories to the surface that had been long buried. And I became, what's the word? Overprotective of her. Uh, I became postpartum anxiety doesn't even touch what I had after giving birth. And so much of this was just a visceral response to seeing this vulnerable infant who was mine, and wanting to protect her from things that I was only just starting to remember. That was a wild experience, but one that I believe that I was meant to have. Um, and it's things like this, experiences that feel horrible on the surface, but are so beautifully designed to expand my soul that when I can step back from it, I think, damn, the universe is good. And I think when you ask, what led me kind of out of that situation and into creating a new life, a new and different life for myself, and my healing journey was these little almost breadcrumbs of these experiences of these horrific yet beautiful wound healing processes that it just lured me right out. I was a sucker for it.
What I believe you're talking about is what we would call your authentic self, Jenny.
Yeah.
And so everybody's deals with what I call a dysregulated thinker. Our brain is nothing more than a mass of organic goo. Okay, it's a data processor. It absorbs all this data that's coming in through our senses, and it's our mind that shapes, shifts, and sorts all of these thoughts in here. And just because we have a thought doesn't make it true. Okay, that's cognitive
Mm,
fusion. But however, um, there's just way more to it than that. You know, most women, again, I deal with the guilt, the shame, and all
mm,
these type of things. And what I try to impress upon them is that they are important. And I will say, I want you to understand that you're important, and this just isn't therapist gobbledygook that I'm throwing out there. You're important. And you know what, Jenny, for some of these women that I tell them that, that's the first time they've ever heard that.
Mm, I can imagine. Yeah. Wow.
And that their thoughts and nobody's thoughts and feelings are more important than their own.
Mm.
And what's good for you is good for everybody. And,
I think
but they're taught that they should be absolutely self-sacrificing. Uh,
it's true. It's
and
so true.
yes, and that's a falsehood that's imposed upon women. Well, that's your role. That's your role. No,
Mm.
no, I think I'll create my role. I think one of the most disrespectful things that a human being can say to another is, "I know how you feel."
Mm. Oh,
That's impossible, Jenny.
yeah. I've
So
never thought about that. I love that.
so it's really important that we're able to label and describe how we think and feel. Did you ever have a pet, Jenny? Do you ever have a dog?
Mhm.
Okay. What was the name of your dog?
Well, I've had multiple animals throughout my lifetime. I am an avid animal lover. Do you want to know about my first
Yeah, let's
dog?
talk about your first one.
This is a guilt and shame-inducing story. The first dog that was ever in my life was named Lad
Lad.
Collie.
Okay. Did you love
And
Lad?
I did love Lad, yes.
And the reason this isn't a guessing game here to prove how smart somebody is or how much you know. Uh, the reason that people give pets names?
What's the reason that they
Yeah.
give
What are the
names? I guess it, personifies the pet, does it make it theirs?
It certainly does. So if you had never given Lad a name and Lad would have ran outside and ran off, how would you have called him back?
I don't know.
And how would you have felt if your beloved pet ran off?
Terrible.
Anxious, worry, fearful, afraid,
Mhm.
frustrated, angry, all of those things. Well,
Mm.
Jenny, our thoughts and our feelings are like that also. So if
Mm.
we're not able to accurately label and describe exactly how we feel, then they get away from us too, and hence we feel all that. How many times have you said to somebody, "How are you feeling?" and they said they don't know?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot. Or "Fine,"
Idiom.
which means I
That's a standard American greeting.
Yeah,
Yeah, how are you? I'm fine. How good. What if you actually stopped and told somebody exactly how you were feeling?
yeah, I think, yeah, that some people might say, "Okay, bye."
Yeah, they'd try to say, what are the symptoms of a stroke?" And they try
Right.
just to try to get away from you. So it's that interpersonal type of uh, relationship that we lost, and a lot of it is through social media, which all it invites is comparison. So one of the suggestions that we make is avoid comparison, avoid com- avoid criticizing, and avoid complaining, and always be grateful. And
Mhm.
those just seem like common sense things, but oh my gosh, is it so difficult for people to do.
It is. It really is. You truly have to dig deep sometimes.
So sometimes what we'll ask, and maybe you do this too, I'll ask people to look in the mirror and tell me what they see. Not the physical things, but what do they see?
Mm.
Or I'll ask them, what does the mirror see? So this is a whole thing about inner discovery, which most people come to therapy and they think that therapists are magicians, and in 5 or 6 sessions, then everything's going to be just wonderful. But I kind of tell people, I said, you know what, we can't turn the Titanic around in a bathtub. So if you're a 40-year production, we talked earlier before the show about being a 20-year overnight success. Could you say a little bit more about that in your life? And we're going to be continuing our conversation with Jenny on our next episode. And please check out their website, coolaforcomma.org. Fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Unplug your television and take up fishing. And for a truly mindful experience, we suggest you fish without bait, Please do a kindness for yourself and a kindness for another. Forgive yourself and forgive another. Till all are free, none are free. If we're all not God's children, then none of us are. Namaste.
Please check out our website at fishingwithoutbait.com, where you can listen to the show, comment on our discussions, and find out where you can subscribe to our podcast. If you're interested in flying the colors of Fishing Without Bait, click the shop icon on our website. We have clothing, mugs, cell phone cases, and so much more. Show the world that you fish without bait. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.